Morning, everybody. It is the not so crazy lady at Can't Make Sane Out of Crazy. So I want you to listen to this. Remember when I told you guys that this journalist that got hacked to pieces, that I felt it possibly could have something to do with either the CIA, this human trafficking that's going through these countries, the deal with Trump to end human trafficking, and the fact that this guy was a puppet for the Clintons through the Washington Post. So I just want you to listen to what this guy has to say, and then you can leave your comments below. This is another slap in the face to the left and kind of to the rhinos because they don't read Arabic, okay? And basically this guy was a face duo, two-faced, okay? Talking out of both sides of his head. So listen to what they have to say and then think. Any of you that are over the age of 30, think what he's saying. That this guy was literally saying one thing while being part of this radical, infiltrated, and embedded Muslim Brotherhood.
Bin Laden and being a comrade of Bin Laden.
Hang on, sorry. You can listen to
the
whole.
With weapons, he fought alongside.
You can listen to the whole interview on Real News. But this, look, just go with your gut. If your gut tells you there's more to the story, there usually is.
Us about Jamal Khashoggi and what he stood for as far as journalism and ethics of journalism is concerned.
Well, I mean,
remember also there was a German journalist that basically blew the whistle. You cannot be a journalist in Western journalism without being an asset to or for MI5, the CIA, or the NSA. We know that the CIA pays millions of dollars out to newspapers to feed you propaganda because of Barack Obama made it okay to literally lie to you in your own country and do false flags, and literally slaughter you in your own town, in your own country, and blame it on some poor schmuck who is just a trigger puller, just a puppet, a possessed demon vessel to do their dirty work. Just saying.
He's close to my age, so his name has been familiar to me since my early youthful days back in Lebanon. And in our progressive left-wing Marxist circles, he was always a symbol of reactionary advocacy on behalf of the Saudi regime and militant Salafite Islam. That's what he stood for. The picture that is being painted in mainstream Western media is totally unrecognizable for anybody who bothers to read Arabic. Unfortunately, all the people who are commenting about the issue and commenting even about his record of journalism, so to speak, are people who never read anything that he wrote except in the Washington Post. You cannot judge this man's entire decades-long career of journalism by reading the English language edited articles he posted for the last year only. For much of his life, for the whole of his life minus last year, this man was a passionate, enthusiastic, unabashed advocate of Saudi despotism. He started his career by joining Bin Laden and being a comrade of Bin Laden. There are pictures of him with weapons. He fought alongside the fanatic mujahideen who were supported by the United States and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, among others, against the communist progressive side in that war. And he was unrelenting in his advocacy on their behalf, as well as for his praise for Bin Laden. he got to be pretty close to bin Laden. That's not being mentioned in the media as well. He only broke with bin Laden in the mid-1990s. What a coincidence. It was around the same time that the Saudi government broke with bin Laden. That tells you that he has been very consistently an advocate and loyal servant of the Saudi propaganda apparatus. Because when people say that he was always cared about journalism, what journalism? There is no journalism under the Saudi regime. There was only propaganda, crude and vulgar propaganda. And he excelled in the art of Saudi propaganda. He moved from one job to the other, and he was very ambitious early on, and he attached himself to various princes, because that's how it works in Saudi Arabia. He was close to Prince Turki Al Faisal, who was chief of foreign intelligence and the sponsor patron of bin Laden and the fanatical Islamists around the world. And he also was loyal to his brother, Prince Khalid Al Faisal, who owned Al Watan newspaper, where he held his first editing job in that paper. In a recent interview he did only last year with a Turkey-based television station, in Arabic of course, he spoke about how his role was not only as an editor, but he was a censor. He was enforcer of the rigid dogmas of the Saudi government in the paper. And when people wrote he got in trouble during his job, it wasn't for anything he wrote. He never wrote a word, never spoke a word against the wishes of the Saudi government. He got in trouble because some people in the paper were courageous, unlike him, and dared to challenge the orthodoxy of the government. That was the career of Jamal Khashoggi. I also should say that for many years he continued, and he became a spokesperson for Prince Turki when he became ambassador in Washington, D.C., and he got to be close to Western journalists because he was the man to go to when they wanted to travel to Saudi Arabia. They wanted to interview this prince, that king, the crown prince. He was a fixer for them in that regard, and that's how they got to know him. And then he attached himself to another prince, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who got in trouble with the new crown prince. That's where his trouble started. He did not bet on democracy in Saudi Arabia. He bet on the wrong princes. The princes he bet on fell out of favor. Prince Turki, as well as Prince Al-Walid later, who wound up in Ritz in Riyadh last year. And for that reason, he had no patent prince. According to his own accord, to his own testimony in an article that was written by David Ignatius, who was close to him, he tried to be an advisor to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, but he wouldn't take him as an advisor because he always was suspicious about his Islamist past, the fact that he was a member and later close to the Muslim Brotherhood. So he spoke the language of democracy upon leaving the country. The reason why they wanted to go after him, it had nothing with his courage over there or anything like that. It's because he was so central in the ruling media and political establishment that his departure from the kingdom was not seen as dissent. He was not a dissenter. He was not a dissident. He never saw himself as one, or even an opposition figure. He spoke himself as somebody who believed that the crown prince was doing the right thing, but going about it the wrong way. I basically believe that he was seen by the government as a defector, that one of their own left the country and joined the enemy's rank. And he was also having an audience with Western audiences from Washington, D.C., from one of the major mainstream newspapers. That was highly embarrassing to the royal family. In Arabic, I should mention, even in the last year, on Twitter, he spoke a very different tone than when he wrote in Washington Post. In Arabic, he spoke passionately about Palestine. Notice, he never spoke about Palestine in English, never spoke about that. In Arabic, he said, "We all are Trump," when Trump ordered the bombing of Syria. He never spoke like that in the Washington Post. So he was an agreeable token Arab writing for the Washington Post who never challenged the Western media and their coverage of the Middle East. And for that, he was quite agreeable to them. He never spoke about the Palestinians. I bet you if he was advocating for the Palestinians or for the Islamist line that he called for in Arabic, he wouldn't have lasted in his gig in the Washington Post.
All right, Asad, tell us a little bit more about what you just said, which was that he backed the wrong prince. Why did he find himself on the wrong side of this prince? And some detail as to what the divide is.
That's a very good question. And the thing is, the government of Saudi Arabia has changed in the last 2 years in a major way. For much of the history, since 1953 and the death of the founder, Saudi Arabia, even though it's a despotic monarchy, is ruled by a collective leadership, like the Politburo of the former Soviet Union. You have a royal family, and then you have the senior princes. Those are the ones with whom the king would consult on every matter. For that reason, as sinister as reactionary as Saudi policy was all these decades, but it was a result of a consensus within the royal family. For that, it exhibited signs of caution, reservation, and deception always, because they were doing something in secrecy, and in public they were saying something entirely opposite. Under the crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, government has changed. There is no collective leadership. For the first time in the history of the monarchy, we have a sole undisputed despot who does not allow not only dissent, but advisors. Everybody has to be yes men, and of course all of them are men around him. He subordinated all the princes. He ended all the factions representing different princes. So previously, no matter who was king, Jamal Khashoggi was able to move between the princes, to have one patron one day, another patron another day. That always worked because they were part of the senior princes setup. Now, there is no setup like that. All the other princes, even his own half-brothers under house arrest. This guy doesn't want to allow anybody to share government. He makes all the decisions. And in fact, we can say, that was his death knell. Maybe this is why this is going to change the course of his history. He will most likely stay in power, but I would argue that his best days are behind him. He will never be as powerful as he has been for the last 2 years, because now he knows he cannot trust his own instincts. When he ruled entirely based on his instincts, he presumably made the decision to get rid of this guy. He did not think the repercussions were going to be big enough. And I still argue he's going to get away with it. And there's not going to be a price to pay by Western countries, by Turkey, or by the United States. I feel they are working on a cover-up story as we speak. But because he had no advisors, he made these decisions. And he is not somebody who's knowledgeable about the world. He does not know about foreign policy as much. And he calculated wrongly. And he is now in a very awkward, embarrassing position. And for that, he will be weaker than ever. And most likely, he will be compelled to bring in other princes, not to share power, but at least to be around him when he contemplates making decisions.
All right, Asad, in your opinion, why is the Western media whitewashing Jamal Khashoggi in this way? Are they simply just not aware because they're not reading Arabic, or is there something else at hand here?
That's how Western media are. Whenever they choose a hero from among the natives, they want to make the native to be in their own image. The best example would be the leader who was most beloved in the entire history of the Middle East in the 20th century by Western media and Western government. I'm talking about Anwar Sadat, the despot of Egypt from 1970 until his assassination in 1981. This guy was a notorious anti-Semite and a Nazi. He had Nazi background. And yet all that was forgiven because he did the right thing when it comes to Israel. This time, they have one of their own who wrote in the Washington Post, and they took that as an offense. And I also want to add, the Saudi regime is saying that this issue is used also by media and Democrats who do not like Trump as a way to embarrass him. And I think they are not far-fetched on that line. It is not that the media suddenly discovered that, lo and behold, there is a government which kills journalists. In the last few months, the Israelis have killed journalists who were wearing, literally, signs that they were press, they work for the press. And we saw no outcry. But Jamal Khashoggi was seen as an inferior one of their own, as one of the natives who was agreeable. He never challenged their coverage of the Middle East. They liked that. They also liked that he never spoke about Palestine in the paper, never questioned the assumptions about American foreign policy, and they want to make it a big issue in their conflict with the administration or as convenient.
Yep.
So there is ulterior motive to what they're doing, and certainly I do not buy that the Washington Post or the New York Times or even the U.S. Congress suddenly have discovered to the horrors of the Saudi regime. It wasn't about that.
Asad, what was Jamal Khashoggi's position on Palestine? As you said, he only articulated it in Arabic, never in the English press. And we know that at this moment, there is a conflict within Saudi Arabia in terms of what the king might respond, how he might respond to the Palestinian question and how the current MSB is responding to it. And also, if you could also in the process highlight what this means in terms of the Saudi-Israeli-US alliance that has been formed in order to manage the situation in the Middle East.
Well, I begin with the last part of the question by saying I have no doubt that AIPAC is working very closely with the Saudi embassy in order to try to rescue the fortunes of this crown prince in distress. And I am sure AIPAC is going to clamp down in Congress to make sure that there's not going to be legislation that would be in any way embarrassing to the Saudi royal family. I also want to say that there is no doubt that in his last year, that Jamal Khashoggi was rather duplicitous, that he spoke very different languages in Arabic and in English.
Yep.
He said one thing in the Washington Post, which you can read now, available on their website, but in Arabic it was a different tune. In Arabic, he spoke rather very respectfully about the royal family. He spoke about, he wanted the Saudi royal family to sponsor and to lead the Arab uprising, or what we call the Arab Spring. He wanted Saudi Arabia to lead it. Just imagine the repercussion of that, which is exactly what happened, which is Saudi Arabia led the counter-revolution, not the revolution of the Arab world. I also want to say that on Palestine, he was very unequivocal, very categorical. He spoke about there should be no compromise on the Palestinian question. He spoke about against the deal of the century that was being prepared by this administration. He even said in an interview that I listened to the other day, and this is from last year, from this year itself, 2018, he said that he believes that Jerusalem and its significance to Muslim and Arab does not in any way count less than the two holy sites of Saudi Arabia. He was against normalization with the state of Israel, but now we realize that he was not consistent in his life about these matters, because apparently he knew and had an ongoing friendship with an Israeli reporter with whom he would speak, and to her he said that he would like the Iran regime to collapse and that would benefit the state of Israel. So he was a man of many sides, and the media and Human Rights Watch and all these Western outlets are trying to paint an image of a man who was uncompromising in search of truth, justice, and almost the American way, like Superman of the old TV serials. And in Arabic, Jamal Khashoggi always had an appeal among the Muslim Brotherhood. This was his audience. His political line is very close to that of Turkey. For that, he had a very close relationship with the Turkish government. And as we read, when he went into the consulate, he gave his fiancée the phone number of a key presidential advisor to Erdogan to call him if he is missing. And not every Arab journalist can call a close advisor of Erdogan at a moment's notice.
Exactly.
All right, Saad, I thank you so much for joining us. And
for me, when I hear these stories, my first thoughts go to spook. The guy was a spook. And not only was he a spook, but he was a treasonous spook. The guy was no good. He was a seditious, treasonous, lying sack of shit. He said one thing to the Muslim Brotherhood, and he said another thing to the Washington Post. Now, I'm sorry, but that seems to be the MO for the Clintons, the DNC, pretty much the Rhinos, pretty much anybody who's been a part of this disgusting, warmongering, conspirator, RICO mob. That's all it is. They give the mob a bad name. Not so crazy lady out.